So those of you who've been watching my videos for a while now know that not so long ago I did a tutorial/review of one of the most popular Blender add-ons on the Blender market, which of course was Extreme PBR 2. Now this add-on, the whole purpose of it was for anybody who wanted to do PBR inside of Blender. That's physically based rendering. It's highly tied into photorealism. And the issue is there's two types of people. One type of person already knows how to use nodes, which is very necessary for setting up PBR materials. However, this becomes very repetitive and you're setting up the same node networks and it just takes forever, so you're just wasting a lot of time. And the second type of person, which is most people, don't know how to use nodes in the first place. And it's something very complicated to learn for very small payoff when you can do it very quickly. So this add-on basically made a very simple interface that let you do PBR basically inside the 3D viewport. And it was great, but there are features that people did want in an update. And the reason I'm making this video is such an update now exists. And you can see in this product page, we have Extreme PBR Combo. This is the new version. It's no longer 2. 2 is still available. You can see it's the old version, but now we have Extreme PBR Combo, which addresses some of these features that people want. Now, what are these features? Of course, there's a ton of them, but I'm only going to talk about, right now, the very important ones, and then we'll dive into it. So the very important features that were added is the first one, this is the one that you should really care about, is that now you can take your material library, let's say you already have some materials from some website or you got them for free, now you can actually add them into this framework. Before, you had to do a lot of complicated stuff and it wasn't intrinsic to the add-on, but now there's actually settings inside of it that let you add your own custom materials. So that's great, and you can also bake and save materials. So that's one thing. The second thing that is very important is you can actually mess around with your UVs. And normally you'd have to go into the UV editor and it takes a lot of time and you have a bunch of different windows, but now you're doing this inside a 3D viewport. So really what Extreme PBR Combo is doing here is it's really letting you do most of your material stuff, pretty much everything you need to do. There's very little that you can't do in it. It's taking everything you need to do and keeping it exactly where you work, so you're saving time and you're not trying to learn something that's very complicated that you don't really want to learn in the first place. So during this tutorial/review, that's what this is going to be. If at any point you want to pick this up for yourself, you want to try it out, I do have a discount code that will save you 20% if you want to purchase it, and that is CGMatter, all in lowercase. And for those of you thinking that this benefits me, it doesn't. Every time you use a discount code, I don't get anything out of it. You get something out of it. You save 20%. So I would recommend using it. Doesn't benefit me, although that would be nice. So use it if you want to. So what we're going to talk about is installation, how to use it in the first place, and what was added from version 2. And we're just going to go over everything and talk about what this lets you do and how effective it is at doing the things that it promises. So let's hop into installation to begin with. So when you've purchased Extreme PBR Combo and you've downloaded all the add-on files, you're going to get these 8 files along with a manual that actually tells you how to install this add-on, and it also tells you a bunch of information about how to use it. Of course, we're not going to actually use this manual because I'm going to show you how to do everything from scratch in this video. So we get these 8 files, and again, I want to talk about what each of these do. So the first of these is going to be the actual add-on zip file, and here we have the 2.8 version. You might have the 2.79, but it's the same idea. So this is what we're actually going to install into Blender. Then we have these 6 zip files, and these actually contain the 800 plus PBR materials, so altogether there's something like 11 plus gigs, so this is where the materials are stored. And then finally, we have this last zip file, which is basically going to be, once we extract it, it's going to be our directory for our custom materials from our custom library that we can use inside this framework. So what we want to do is with these files, we're going to create a new folder, and you can call it whatever you want. I'm going to go for the obvious choice, Extreme PBR Combo, and we're going to take our 8 files. Again, this could be 2.79, doesn't matter. And you're going to take these and drag them into the folder. So they're all in the same directory, and then open that up. Okay, so we're going to have to do a bit of extracting here, so make sure you either have WinRAR, 7-zip, or anything in general that can read .zip files, So the first thing we're going to have to extract is this user library. So just right click, and I'm going to be using 7-zip for this. With WinRAR, you do the equivalent. So in 7-zip, I'm going to click extract here. And it's going to quickly extract this folder into this directory, and you can open this up and see that there's a bunch of files in here. Don't worry about that because we're not going to have to mess with it because we're going to do it within the add-on. Okay, the next thing we actually need to extract is, you would think we need to extract all 6 of these since we need all the PBR materials, but it's actually set up, the file structure is set up in a way such that you only have to extract this zip 001 and it's going to take care of the rest for you. So again, right click, 7-zip, and then extract here. So same type of workflow, and this is going to take, substantially longer. We're dealing with 11.8-ish almost gigs of data, and if we actually open up the folder that it's currently writing, you can see that it's creating all these categories, and inside of them we can see a bunch of 2K materials, so it's populating this, and it will probably take a moment. If it takes too long, we can fast forward, but I do think I have things to talk about while this happens. So what this is doing is for each of these, it's going to make a material and then set up a bunch of textures in here, but of course you don't need to access it via this because we have an add-on just for that. Okay, should be done in a bit. I wonder if it's faster if we look at it. Might be faster if we look at it. I don't think it's a good idea to speed this up because what's it going to be, like a 5-second speed up? And you're going to learn so much more from seeing that. Honestly, it takes a bit, but around a minute, 60 seconds, not something you have to skip around for. And basically what we're going to do is once this is extracted is we're going to put the add-on in Blender and then tell Blender where to look for these libraries of materials, both our custom library and this library that comes with it, the 800 plus PBR materials. Okay, so it's almost done. Okay, it's done. And we actually don't need to do anything else with this now that it's done, and we can open up Blender. In this case, version 2.8. If you do 2.79, open up 2.79. So hopefully this will open up. Okay, so we're using the release candidate. Very soon we can use the official 2.8 stable. Doesn't really matter. So in Edit, we want to go to Preferences. And in the add-on section, which is already open for us, this is where we actually want to install an add-on. And it's not going to be in this list because we haven't installed it yet. So just click Install. And then you just want to look for the directory where you have this saved. So for us, it's in the desktop and then inside Extreme PBR Combo, and hit this one that says 2.8 or 2.79, and then install add-on from File. And this is going to add for the 3D view Extreme PBR. Again, this is something that works from within the viewport, and we just want to take this add-on and obviously enable it. And if we open this up, you see we actually need to do a bit more work here. And we have 2 directories we need to fill. Again, one's going to be our custom, which is all the materials we have from a custom library. And then the second one is just going to be the materials that come with it. So we're going to start off with the default Extreme PBR library. So just hit this folder icon, and we're just going to look for that directory. So again, desktop, and then Extreme PBR Combo. And we're going to use the official library, which is this one, Extreme PBR Library. So just click that, and you don't need to pick any of these specifically, so just click Accept. So we have the whole folder loaded, not just the asphalt or the brick materials, the whole thing. And then if we also want our custom directory, and even if you don't bring in your own materials, this is something you want to set up just in case you decide to save your own materials later on. We're going to hit this folder icon, Desktop, Extreme PBR Combo, and this time the user library. Pretty self-intuitive, self-explanatory. It's obvious. You click it, you click Accept, and now everything is set up. And you could take my word for it, or I could show you. So if you hit N for the properties, you can see Extreme PBR Combo, and this is where the menu is. Again, we're not going to talk about how this works yet. That is the next section, but this is just to show that everything's loaded in. All the materials are loaded in, including our user library, which comes with a couple things by default, but we haven't added anything ourselves. And just in case you don't have this set up already, back in the preferences, once we've set up this add-on, you want to make sure that in this little button right here, you either have auto save preferences, so next time you open up Blender, it's going to keep this add-on in memory so it knows that you actually want to use this add-on, it's going to reference it, or you can just save current state manually. And again, this is just to make sure that when you close Blender and then open it up again, you still have this add-on present. So we've talked about installation, and now we actually need to talk about at least a refresher on how to use the add-on as it was before as PBR version 2, Extreme PBR version 2, and then we're going to slowly add in the features that are new to the combo version. So a quick refresher on how to use Extreme PBR. So like I said, we're going to do a quick refresher on some of the features that already existed in Extreme PBR, and then we're slowly going to introduce the new features added in Extreme PBR Combo. So during this very, very fast overview, if at any point you want a more in-depth look on what's happening here, make sure to check out the previous video because I go over it in depth. But right now we're just going to get everybody up to speed before we introduce the new features. So we have the default Blender scene loaded here. We have our cube, camera, light, standard Blender scene, and if you hit N, for properties, you're going to see Extreme PBR Combo, and that is, of course, if you installed it. If you followed the installation instructions, you will have this. And you're going to see that we have this nice little interface, and by default, we're set to Extreme PBR Library, and this is the 800 plus PBR materials that come with the add-on. And you can see right now we're set to Asphalt category, and inside of this, we have something like 20, 30. It's kind of hard to count, right? Let's see, that's 3, 6, 8, 16, 17, for those of you who can't count, 17 asphalt PBR materials, and you can change this to whatever type of category you want. And for example, if we want a ice material, we'd go into ice and then pick one of these. And that's just the selection. We haven't applied this to our cube or anything. We're just saying this is in our hot seat and we want to do something with it very soon. So with our cube selected, you see we have this material loaded. This is the standard material that comes with the cube when you open up Blender. It's just a principled BSDF, but that doesn't really matter. If we select nothing, if we select a camera, something that doesn't have a material, it's not going to have a material here. So with our cube, we have this material, and what we want to do is replace it with this ice material. Now, Extreme PBR Combo, this is a combo feature, has a very nice button, which is the swap button. They call it a replace material. We're not going to talk about it yet because, again, that's a new feature, but here's the old way to do it, and you can tell that it's fine, but it's not as quick. So what you do is with this material selected, you would remove it, so now we no longer have that default material, and with this material selected, we just click Add. And now we have ice number 2 loaded into here. Well, why don't we see anything? Well, that's because we're looking at it from the solid view in here. So we want to change over to rendered view, which you can do by hitting this button, or Z, which opens up this pie menu, and then go to rendered. And you're going to see we have this ice. But if we take our light and move it around, you see it's just lighting it, but it's not really interacting with the material in any way, right? We want this to be PBR, not just color diffuse channel. And the reason we only have the diffuse channel right now is when we added this material, this PBR material, in our choose map section, we only had diffuse enabled. So when it added this, it only brought in the diffuse channel. So we want to make sure we have all these maps enabled so we get roughness, metalness, some people call it metallic. I don't know what's with metalness, it's kind of weird. Specular, normal, displace, and we can bring all that in. So with our cube selected, we're just going to remove this and we're going to enable all these channels, and now we're going to add that back in. Now when we move this light, for those of you who are looking very carefully, there is a bit of a difference here. Of course, it's kind of hard to tell because ice doesn't actually have a lot of roughness. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the same kind of procedure, but with something like rock. But that is the correct way to do it. So let's pick a rock that looks very bumpy, like this rock right here. Make sure all these are enabled and then add new. And it will take a second. And now when we move around the light, you're going to see some lighting interactions. To make it much more intense, we can actually dive into the material settings and, bring up the normal map and things like this. So cube selected, with this material selected, we're going to go into the material settings. And here we have a bunch of settings that are pretty self-explanatory, like the contrast, the hue, and let's just zoom in here so you can see what's happening, the brightness. Again, this is all going to be fairly subtle because it's rock material. We can bring in some ambient occlusion and change the strength of that with the AO range. But what is really going to give this some depth is taking this normal map and strengthening it. That is a word right there. Strengthening it to 1. So now it's much stronger and it's going to interact with the light much more obviously. So you can really see that this is PBR. It's interacting with the lighting in our scene. However, right now we have this cube and there's no displacement going on. If we look at it from kind of the side view, it's pretty much a cube. If you look at the geometry, it's 6 faces. We don't have any of that bumpiness that we want from our rock, which would come from a displacement map, which is weird because we have a displacement map imported. So what's the deal with this? Well, the thing is that displacement works on a geometry level. So what it's doing is it's displacing, hence the displacement map, it's displacing the geometry to give us that bumpiness. And when we have no geometry, like we only have 6 faces, there's nothing to actually move around. So if we go into our display settings and bring up the strength, all it's going to do is make our cube a bit bigger because it's just moving those 8 vertices, right? There's nothing for it to do any detail with. So let's actually bring this back to 5, and we want to add more detail. And you can do this directly from the add-on. So the way you can do this is in the utility menu. We can switch mode, which is just a button to change to edit mode. So now we're in edit mode, and you think the way to go is to start subdividing. So you're like, okay, I'm going to click this subdivide button. It doesn't work. It doesn't even work. So what's the issue with this? The thing is that this add-on actually wants you to tell the add-on what it is that you actually want to subdivide. Do you want to subdivide only part of the mesh, the whole mesh? So what we need to do is specify a vertex group. So with everything selected, we're going to add a vertex group, and now this add-on, Extreme PBR, knows that we're referring to the whole cube, and then we start subdividing. And it's working exactly like we'd expect. We're going to do a couple iterations here and then switch mode back into object mode. Now this is very subtle, but you can almost tell that there's a bit of bumpiness going on. Of course, we want to make this more extreme so you can actually see what's going on here. So let's go to our strength and bring it up to something like 20. And now it's very obvious that this is no longer a cube. However, if we go into edit mode, you can see our geometry is still basically a subdivided cube. It's just that this displacement is moving it around, but this isn't baked into the geometry or anything. To make this a bit less awkward with the edges, what we can do is smooth those out, and there's actually a setting for this. It's the smooth factor. And we can bring that up to something like 1, and you can get even more ridiculous with it, like 2, and you're going to get some nice smoothing going on here. And when I said 2, just disregard that because it's a scale from 0 to 1. So to make it more intense, you want to take the repeat smoothing and bring that up. So 15, and now we get even more smoothing. Okay, and like I said, when we go into edit mode, this isn't actually baked into our geometry, but this is totally something that we can do by hitting this bake displacement. It's going to take a second, and then you see when we go into edit mode, this is part of our geometry. So when we remove this material, it's going to get rid of, the roughness, the diffuse, the metallic metalness, the specular, all that, but of course it's going to keep this geometry because we baked it in. So you can just delete, you can remove this material, or what you can do is use this extreme clean menu, which lets you get rid of things either altogether or only some parts at a time. So for example, you can remove only the displacement. Of course, this wouldn't matter at this point because we baked it in, so there's nothing to get rid of. You can get rid of multiple materials, single materials. So we're just going to remove all materials. And you see, now we're just left with this cube, and we can add a different material to this, something like a marble, like this one, and when we add this in, it's still going to inherit all the displacement from before because we baked it in. And I think that's pretty much the very, very, very quick overview of how to use Extreme PBR. And again, go to the video from before to get the in-depth details. I go over it in depth, and you really do want to watch this. But now we want to talk about the new features that were added in Extreme PBR Combo that add on to this whole idea of the node-free workflow. So the first new feature I want to talk about that was added to Extreme PBR Combo is probably the simplest addition, but it's very, very powerful. And I already mentioned that it is this replace button, which comes with a replace menu. And we can toggle this one option off and on. And we're going to talk about why this replace menu is much faster and why it's so powerful. So right now we have the default Blender scene with our cube, and it has the default material, as you can see right here. And if we pick a material from our PBR library, like this asphalt, this very first option that comes open right when you open Extreme PBR Combo in this case, the way we would actually apply this material normally back in version 2 is we would take this material that's already on here, we would remove it, and then with this material selected, we would add it back in. Pretty simple. Of course, we don't see anything because we need to be in the rendered view. But, that's the very simple procedure, but you can imagine that if you have 50 objects in a scene, each one with its own material, you're probably going to want to swap them out very frequently, and, the time it takes to do this would really add up. So here's the alternative. What you do is you select a different material, so let's choose something like a wood plank, something for a floor, pick something like this one, and instead of doing the removing and the adding, all we need to do is have this material selected and then click this replace button. And you see it swapped it. And it actually respects the which maps you've chosen feature. So if you go to choose maps, we only have diffuse. So we're going to enable all of these. And now when we swap this to something like this, let's do another replacement. Now it's actually going to replace all those maps. So it's going to include everything. And if we bring our light here, it's probably going to be pretty subtle because the height on wooden planks isn't that much. But we do actually get, the diffuse, the metalness, roughness, displacement, all of that. So that is the replacement feature, but what about this button right here, replace on all objects? Well, it's pretty self-explanatory what that does. We can take this cube, duplicate it a couple times, and now pick something different, as if, maybe we're trying to pick a different floor and we're trying to visualize a bunch of different PBR materials for this. That's one use case. So we'll pick this one right here, and then with this option enabled, we're going to click replace, and it replaces it on all of them. If we disable this option, now it's on an individual basis. So we can pick this green one and then replace, which is only going to act on this one. Pick something like this, pick this wood plank, and replace. So replacing just speeds up your workflow, and you can do it on all the materials at once. So if you have a scene where you're using a very specific type of wood and you want to replace all the wood at once, that's one way to do it. Or you can do it on an individual level, which might make sense or might take longer, depending on what you're doing. So that is the replace feature. So another new feature of Extreme PBR Combo is the newly added UV editor that is now built inside this add-on. And this is going to let you avoid doing stuff like going into the UV editor window, and in general, you're never going to have to go into the UV editing workspace. You're never going to have to do this again. You're going to save yourself time, and you're going to be able to mess around with your PBR materials, at least how they're being mapped onto your model, all within Extreme PBR Combo. So back inside the layout workspace, before we start messing around with our UVs by scaling, rotating, and translating, we're actually going to need to have some kind of PBR material applied to this so we can actually see what's being transformed. So let's pick a wood plank. So we're going to go for some kind of wooden floor here. Let's go with this one, and we can choose our maps. Again, since we're just altering our UV coordinates, it doesn't matter how many of these maps we apply, it's going to apply to all of them. So all the transformations are going to be applied to all the maps. So we can enable roughness, metalness, or metallic, whatever you want to call it, and the rest of these, and we can add this in and turn on rendered view so we can actually see what's going on here. And just to check that this is indeed PBR, like we keep doing over and over and over again, you can move around this light and you can see that there are tiny crevices between these planks. So we do have our normal map and our displacement map, although we don't have enough geometry for that. So how do you actually alter the UV coordinates? So what you need to do is select the model that you want to alter and go into edit mode. You can do this by either hitting tab on the keyboard, or since we're using Extreme PBR Combo, there is a built-in way to do this, as we've been talking about. In the utility tab, we're going to hit switch mode, so we toggle into edit mode, and you see we get this new tab called UV Editor Beta. Now I know technically it's in beta, but everything in this has worked for me perfectly. So I think it might be time to get rid of that beta little header there, but whatever. So UV Editor Beta. And with our face selected, which in this case happens to be the whole model, we can scale up our UVs, which is going to change pretty much the tiling of our PBR material. Since it's seamless, you're not going to see any seams. That's what seamless means. So that's our scale. We can also change translation in both X and Y. And then finally, we can do our rotation. And I guess technically that's not finally, because with our scaling, we were scaling uniformly. We can also scale on only the X or the Y axis, and we can do that by locking one of the axes one at a time, and then changing our scale. And then when we disable both of these, we get back to uniform scaling. So let's go back to 0-degree rotation, so it's going flush with this x-axis. And at this point, you may be thinking, okay, that's cool. You can do all the operations that you'd be able to do in the UV editor window, all the scaling, rotation, and translation. But in this case, what's really the point? We're dealing with a plane here. So back in object mode, we can rotate it, move it, and scale it. So really, what's the point here? Well, this is where, I keep saying it, but this is where Extreme PBR Combo, and especially this UV editor, becomes especially powerful, extremely powerful. Because if we go into edit mode again with this switch mode button, which toggles everything, We can add in a loop cut with Control R and bring that over here. So now we have two faces, one on the right and one on the left. And what we can do with this is the UV editor in this add-on actually respects our selection. I'm going to say that again. It really respects our selection. So if we only have this left one selected in our UV editor, we can scale, and it's only going to affect the left face. If we scale, or if we pick this one and do maybe a rotation, it's only going to do it on this. So this is a true replacement for the UV editor window. So let's do this by 90 degrees. And the cool part is, since this does it to all our maps, it's going to interact correctly. And specifically, I want to talk about how this interacts with our displacement. So if we go into object mode, we do technically have displacement applied. And if we go to our display settings and bring this up, we'll see if it changes. Yes, it does this very weird distorting, because the only geometry it has, again, is just these two faces. So we need to add more geometry. Again, the way we do that is select everything, and then inside our utility tab, we're going to add this as a vertex group, so the add-on knows we want to deal with everything here, everything that's selected, and then we begin subdividing. And we don't want to do too many of these. This should be fine. When we go back into object mode, you see this monstrosity because we took our display settings and brought them way too high. Way too high. So we can bring it back down to something like 5. And you can see that the displacement's also respecting this UV transformation we did. So we have displacement going this way, and then also going this way. And if we bake this in, and then we can strip this of the material by removing it. But again, we baked the displacement, so that is inside the geometry now. The geometry has actually been altered, and you can see that this is actually a viable way to model things. So if you wanted to model some room where wooden planks are going one way and then another section they're going another way, which is something that actually happens, but you can do this with any of the PBR materials. So this is actually a feasible way to model, which I don't think was the original intent of this add-on, but it's something that I would personally find very useful. So the UV editor is really powerful in that it lets you do all the transformations, and you can actually choose what selection you want to deal with. So one more example before we go on to the next topic. I'm going to apply a different material. And again, we already have this geometry baked in, so it's going to look a bit weird, but that's fine. I don't want this fence. I want something without any transparency. Let's go for a concrete, and we can disable displacement so we don't get crazy here. So let's add this in. Okay, perfect. So again, we have this displacement from before, but now with concrete, so you're getting this very weird mashup, but that's not the point. The point is, if we go into edit mode, which has a lot of faces, and we do something like a circle selection with C, pick some of these, pick a good patch, okay, and then back in our UV editor, we can scale this. Now this is going to take a bit longer because we're dealing with a much more dense island, so the calculation is something that would take longer even in the UV editor window, but you see that it's actually working exactly how we'd expect. So very powerful. This is one of my favorite features, and now we want to go on to some of the other stuff that Extreme PBR Combo has to offer. So now we're going to talk about how you can take your own custom material and add it right into Extreme PBR Combo. So if you have your own custom library of PBR materials, now you can integrate it right into this add-on, which is a new feature. So we're going to start off by assuming that you don't have any PBR material downloaded, and we need to go to some website to download one for free. And we can actually do the majority of this process from right inside this add-on, so it's all part of the workflow. So if we go into the Web Resources tab, you're going to see a whole bunch of things. First of all, you can check for update, which is going to look for, the newest version of Extreme PBR. So you click this and it'll tell you if there's a new version. And then we also have this stuff which is relevant for downloading PBR materials from different websites. So we already have one website in here, which is the creator's website, but we can actually add our own websites in here. So something like textures.com, texturehaven.com, CCO textures, anything that you want. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new website. So we'll call this custom textures is what we're going to call it. And then for the link, we'll use Texture Haven. But you can use any texture website you want for this. And then all you have to do is, once you have all this set up, save link. And now we have both the creator's website and our custom website, which we can go to by hitting this button, and we'll open up your default browser. For me, that's Chrome. And now we're inside Texture Haven, and we need to download some PBR material that we want to add directly into the add-on. So let's go into textures and do a bit of browsing. It doesn't really matter what we pick here. I'll pick something distinct like this medieval blocks. And here we have a free seamless PBR material, and we can download all the maps at the lowest quality since, this is just an example. And then once that's downloaded, we're going to open this up. So this is just the workflow for getting your own material into this add-on. Of course, you could already have it downloaded, but I'm just doing it from the website. So we're going to take these textures and just put them on the desktop so they're easier to find. But of course, you want to have your own custom library with a nice folder structure and everything. But for now, we'll keep it like this. So we have all our textures dumped here, and now we want to add it into Extreme PBR directly. So back in Blender, what we can do is use this new shader maker menu. So let's open that up, and you have three settings here. You have PBR, video, and emissive. We're going to go over these two, but right now, of course, we're doing PBR. So with PBR selected, we want to give a name for our material. So we'll call it something like custom material. I'm not very creative in this department. And then we can basically load in all the maps we want. It doesn't matter if you don't have all of them, just load in the ones that you do have. So with diffuse, we're just going to click this folder icon, and now it's in our desktop. So we have diffuse, so plug that in. Ambient occlusion, I think we actually have downloaded. Let's see. Yep, we have ambient occlusion. We don't have subsurface. I don't think we have metallic, nor specular, but we do have roughness, so plug that in. If you can find it. Oh, we do have specular. I'm going to go back and add specular. So you basically want to add as much as you have downloaded, because it's going to add more properties to this material and it's going to be more photorealistic. I don't think we did have metal, but we do have displacement, pretty sure. Do we have displacement? We do. And then finally, you have your normal slot, which you can also change to a bump map if the website you downloaded from uses bump maps. But normal is better, and luckily we do have a normal map, so let's bring that in. Where is normal? Normal. And I think it actually also came with a bump map, but between the two, you want to pick normal map 99% of the time. Okay, so once you have everything that you want in here, make sure you don't leave anything out. If you do have that texture, all we're going to do is you can either hit this shader maker add, or as we've been talking about, hit this replace. And now it's been replaced with this custom materials, even though I should have called it custom material since it's not plural. But let's go into the rendered view so we can see it. And you can see we have our brick block here, which is the same thing we download. It's not brick, it's kind of like this stone block. Basically, it's what we downloaded, so it does work. Okay, perfect. But right now, it's kind of a temporary type of material. The moment we open up Blender again, it's not going to be saved. We're just going to have to import in all the maps again. It's not in our Extreme PBR library or our user library. So we want a way to actually save this, so when we open it again, it's going to be in our user library. So the way we do this is, can you guess it? It's Save Management. You go into the Save Management tab. And here you have a bunch of settings, and we want to explain what all of these do, so let me just open up an example. So inside our user library, you see we have a couple, in our test category, we have a couple test materials here. And you can see we have a preview, we have a logo that's white and it says gold UV sphere, and we can edit all of these things. So with our custom materials, what we can do is basically set what this is going to look like. So first of all, we have our logo color. By default, this is white. Just to illustrate that it does work, I'm going to pick something like blue. The logo name, we can call it the CG Matter material. And I do think there is a cap on this. I think it has to be 13 letters or shorter. I'm not going to count it here. I think it might be under 13 letters. It probably isn't. We'll go with CG Matter Matte. Hopefully that works. And then we can also set our UV rotation and UV scale, which is pretty much the tiling that you'll see inside this render image. In this case, I don't really care what it is, so we're just going to leave it as default, but this is something that you can change if you want to. Render quality is how many samples it's going to throw at it for this render preview. Again, I don't really care because I know what I'm looking for. And then let's see, what else? We can add a category for this, so the same way that inside our user library we have this test category, we can add another category to this, so I'm going to do that. We can call it something like, we can call it CG Matter. So inside CG Matter category, we're going to find our custom materials with the logo that we picked. So we're just going to add this as a category. And now you can toggle between which of these categories you want to add it to. So CG Matter. And then let's see, a couple more settings here. We can pick what kind of preview we have here. Let's go back to test so we can see. You have a sphere, a monkey, the shader ball, and a bunch of other settings. I'm going to go for the Suzanne monkey, the classic Blender monkey. Let's do it. Let's do the Suzanne monkey. And then for the background is essentially the HDRI it's going to be rendered inside. So what is it going to reflect? Doesn't really matter. I'm just going to keep it on default. And then, let's see. Yes, so it's inside our test category. We have a name, we have a logo. I think we're good, so we can just save our material. And this is going to just take a bit because it's baking a bunch of stuff, rendering a preview. And in a second, it should be done. Okay, I think it is done. And inside our user library, we have our test, and then we have our CG matter. Let's see, why is it in test? Did I save it as the test category? Did I do that? Oh yeah, I put it inside the test category. I guess I must have toggled it back. But you can see this is now in here, and if we close down Blender and open it up again, it's going to be in here. So let's just do the same type of thing, but this time put it in our CG matter category, which was the original plan. So we can give it a different logo, something like second attempt. And then this time we'll put it directly inside the CG matter category. I just want to show you that this is something that actually works. And then this time we can do something a bit cooler, like a shader ball, not implying that it's cooler than Suzanne or anything, and pick something like the city river background for it to reflect and render off of. And we can pick a different color like yellow. And then, do I have CG matter? I do. So now we save again. It's going to take another second, so let's just wait for that. Okay, should be done. So now, as expected, inside our CG matter category, we now have this with the shader ball, which looks much cooler than the Suzanne, in fact. But yeah, this basically illustrates the point that you can go to any website using the web resources, and if you're done with a website and you never want to go back to it again for some reason, you shun it. What you can do is with a certain website selected, you can just delete the site and then delete current address, and that's going to be gone. So now we only have the developer website, or the creator website. I guess he developed the add-on. But yes, so you can go to any website, download your textures, and basically add it in here, and it will permanently be, once you do your save management, it will permanently be inside your user library, which is very convenient for anybody who has a custom library that they want to make use of inside this framework. Very, very useful. And then finally, we're just going to talk about a couple more things, which is going to be, it's going to be these other settings. It's going to be this video shader maker and this emissive, which do somewhat different things. You know, you're not importing all these PBR textures, so we're going to go over that in just a moment. Now, the last new feature I want to talk about is some of the other options that are available inside the shader maker tab. So if we open this back up, we have the type set to PBR, which is what we use to bring in a custom material from a custom library, or of course you can download those textures from a website like I showed, but there are actually two other options that I talked about before, which are video and emissive. We're going to start off by explaining video, which I think you can guess what it does. It makes a material, but now with a animated texture, so you're loading in a movie file. So we're going to give this material a name, something like video mat, which is short for video material. I think you probably know that. And we can load in a video file, and you can load in pretty much anything that would be compatible with Blender in the first place, so things like MP4 files, AVI files, those are the standard too. So if it's compatible with Blender, it will work here. And I'm just going to pick one of the videos that I use to, or one of the segments of this tutorial, so it's going to get pretty meta. So let's pick the replace section that I filmed earlier, and then once we have a video selected, we just hit this shader maker add, which will add in our material, which is called video mat. Of course, we don't see anything. Can you guess why? Well, it's because we need to go to rendered view, like I've said many, many times. And if we play this right now, you're going to see that it looks like it's stuck on the first frame of the video. It's not animating anything. And the reason this is the case is because we need to tell this add-on to actually take this video and animate it. So we need to preview this animation, and there's a button to do exactly that. So if we go into the material settings of video mat, you're going to see a button that says preview animation. We enable this, and now when we go through this timeline, you can see in the top right corner in this face cam that it's animated. I'm doing something weird with my nose, getting ready to record the tutorial. But now it's actually animating. And there's a couple more features that we can do with this. We can set a start point and an end point. So let's say on frame 37 we want it to start instead of frame 1. We just click set start, and then just go back and forth to load that in. So what's going to happen here is it's going to be frozen on the first frame for the first 37 frames, and then it should start playing. So it gets to frame around 37, and then it starts playing like we expect. And you can do the same type of thing, just click a frame and do a set end. So now we have a start point and an end point. And we can also set this to loop, which in most cases is not going to be very relevant. It's definitely not relevant for this case because the video is like 9 minutes long, whereas we only have 250 frames. But this is something you can do. You can set it to loop. So we've talked about how you can animate it, how you can loop, and the start and end point. But there's actually a couple other settings that are very cool to the video type, and that is the CRT setting. So you can kind of simulate what it would look like for it to be displayed on a cathode ray tube TV, which is what CRT is. So if we bring this up, it's going to be kind of hard to see because we need to increase the emission so we can actually see what's going on here. So let's bring this emission up to 1, so everything's glowing a bit. And by the way, since we're using Eevee, in the render settings, we can enable bloom. And when we bring up the emission more, you can see how this bloom's affecting it. So I'm toggling it on and off and on. And we can actually, set what this glowing is doing, the threshold and all that. And then inside cycles, it should just work automatically because it's physically based rendering. Or should I say path tracing. So let's go back to Eevee. So again, we have this cathode ray tube effects here, and you can see this is kind of doing a chromatic aberration type thing where you can see the red, green, and blue pixels, especially if we zoom in here. And we can actually set the scale. Let me zoom out for this. We can set the scale so you can see how small those pixels are. I guess they're not pixels, it's a cathode ray tube. But you can make your footage look very old, which is interesting. And you can also bring up the emission to something much higher, so it kind of looks like a TV broadcasting some kind of video. So that is the video option, so that's something that wasn't available in version 2, but now you can do it. And then we have one more thing in the shader maker menu, so let's close that. We have the emissive, and this is kind of similar to video in the sense that you want to emit something, but in this case you're just really adding an emissive material, and we can use a texture. As you can see right here, we can use an emission texture to, emit light based off of the luminance of the texture. We're not going to do that, we're just going to use a color. So we have a emissive type, we can call this emissive matte. I'm getting many points in the creativity department, and we can just replace this. Okay, so now we have a default emissive material. It's not that interesting because it's not emitting that much and the color's pretty boring. So if we go into the material settings of emissive material, first of all, we probably want our emissive material to emit. So let's do something like 2, and now you can see it's glowing a bit. Again, the amount that it's glowing is dependent on your bloom settings in here, or in cycles. It will just glow based on how much it would physically do it in a real life scenario. So we can bring up the emission more to make this brighter, and then we can also change the color to something like red. And you can tell this is taking a bit longer to calculate because it's not just making a red material, it's making a red emission material. So it's emitting light, which means it's going to render a bit more slowly than if you were just to make a red square. And of course you can add in a texture here. I don't think I actually have a texture. I'll look in my folder, see if I can find anything, if I have any images on the desktop. I guess we have these textures that we brought in from before, so let's just use those. We can use the roughness. Maybe that's not the best choice. Let's use our displacement, which will have white and black, and then we just want to replace this in. And you can see this is our displacement of those rocks from the floor PBR material. It looks kind of interesting here, admittedly. And again, we want to bring up our emission, so it's actually emitting. We'll do something like 3. And you can see it's emitting based off of where the displacement would happen, so wherever the texture is more white instead of black. And yeah, I mean, we can change the brightness of the texture and all that, but really we just want to talk about the emission in this case. So that is the video type, that is the emission type, and we already covered the PBR type, and that is generally how the shader maker plays a role inside Combo where it didn't in version 2. So if you're a fan of, making your own, not really making your own materials, but taking your own custom library and bringing it in here, so you want to use this framework, but use your own library so it works with your other projects, this is a very, very good option. So I think I've talked about everything I want to go over. So again, if you want to pick this up for yourself, use discount code CGMatter, that's all in lowercase, to get 20% off. I don't make anything off of this, but you save 20%, so I'd recommend it. And it should be a limited time offer. It's only going to be available for a week or so after this video uploads. So if you want to get it, now's the time to act. It's only going to be available for a week. And also, I should mention that since this is sold on the Blender Market, pretty much everything sold on the Blender Market, I don't know if you toggle it on or off, if it's something you choose. If it is something you choose, this creator chose to have a fraction of the earnings from this add-on go directly to the Blender Development Fund. So it's going to the Blender Foundation. So by buying this add-on, you're also kind of indirectly, but kind of directly, donating directly to Blender. So that's, if that's an incentive for you, that is the case. So that is Extreme PBR Combo. I hope that if you were evaluating if you wanted this or if you already had it and you needed a tutorial, this covered or it filled the role that you needed it to. I tried to be very thorough. It's a longer video than the last one, which was like, 9 minutes or something. But I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you on the next one.